He signed the divorce papers, grinning like he had just won the lottery. He had no idea the judge was about to read a figure massive enough to turn that smile into a full-blown mental collapse. What destroyed him wasn't the $27 million, but realizing I had earned every cent of it without taking a single dime from him. If you've ever been called a leech in your own home, this story is for you. My name is Taylor Mitchell, and at 33 years old, I was sitting in a Denver courtroom that felt less like a hall of justice and more like a refrigerated vault designed to preserve the wealthy while freezing out everyone else. My palms were sweating against the polished walnut table, leaving faint, ghostly prints on the varnish that vanished as quickly as my identity had in this marriage. The air conditioning hummed with a low, aggressive drone, circulating air that smelled of floor wax and old paper, chilling the sweat on the back of my neck. Across the aisle, my husband, Grayson Harper, looked like he was about to burst into song. At 37, Grayson was the golden boy of the tech world, CEO of Ridgeview Systems in Seattle, and the man currently divorcing me with the enthusiasm of a teenager finally getting his braces off. He sat there in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than my dad made in a year. His posture was relaxed, legs crossed at the ankle. He was grinning, not a polite, somber smile suitable for the end of a 10-year partnership. It was a wide, teeth-baring grin that stretched ear to ear, the look of a man who had just won the lottery and was simply waiting for the check to clear. He picked up the heavy fountain pen to sign the settlement agreement, and the scratching sound it made on the paper echoed in my skull like nails on a chalkboard. His lawyer, a man named Spencer, who wore a tie the color of a fresh bruise, was standing and addressing the judge. Spencer had a voice like oil pouring over gravel, smooth but with plenty of rough edges hidden underneath. He was painting a picture of Grayson so saintly it was almost nauseating. "Your Honor, Mr. Harper wishes to ensure that Ms. Mitchell is well cared for," Spencer said, gesturing to the papers Grayson was happily defacing with his signature. Despite her lack of employment history and her status as a homemaker, with no significant financial contribution to the marital estate, Mr. Harper has agreed to a lump sum settlement of $50,000, along with retention of her vehicle. We believe this is more than generous. It is a fresh start. Generous. That was the word they kept using, as if I were a charity case, as if I were a stray dog they were feeding one last bowl of kibble before kicking me onto the highway. I looked down at the legal file in front of me. The summary of my life typed out in brutal black and white courier font. Occupation, homemaker. Income, 0. Assets, none. Status, dependent. They had reduced a decade of my life to those 4 words. 10 years of supporting him, listening to his pitches, managing his life so he could manage his code, all erased in the eyes of the court and of Grayson. I was the freelancer with no steady clients. I was the woman who dabbled. I was the shadow that had somehow attached itself to the brilliant Grayson Harper. And now he was finally cutting me loose so he could shine without obstruction. I felt a ball of heat rising in my throat, a mixture of shame and rage that threatened to choke me. I wanted to stand up and scream that I was not a charity case. I wanted to throw the pitcher of ice water at Grayson's smug, handsome face. But then I felt a heavy, steady hand on my forearm. Bennett Cole didn't look like the kind of lawyer who chased ambulances or shouted on television. He looked like a grandfather who spent his weekends fly fishing and reading history books. He had a shock of thick silver hair and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. He was the most expensive lawyer in Denver, though Grayson didn't know that yet. I had paid his retainer in cash from a stack of bills I kept in a safe deposit box Grayson didn't know existed. "Don't let him see you shake, Taylor," Bennett murmured, his voice so low only I could hear it. His eyes were fixed on the judge, but his grip on my arm was firm. "Calm is your weapon today. Rage makes you sloppy. Silence makes you dangerous." I took a deep breath, holding the air in my lungs until they burned, then exhaled slowly through my nose. I forced the heat in my throat to cool. I visualized the anger turning into a block of ice in the center of my chest, cold, hard, unbreakable. I looked up. Grayson had finished signing. He capped the pen with a satisfying click and pushed the documents toward the center of the table. He looked at me then, his blue eyes dancing with mockery. The look one gives an old piece of furniture, finally sold at a garage sale. He was relieved to be rid of me. He looked at me with pity, and that was worse than hate. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so the judge wouldn't hear, but making sure it carried across the short distance between us. "Not bad for someone who brings in zero, is it?" he whispered. "You should be happy, Taylor. You can finally go find yourself, or whatever it is you do all day." The insult landed with precision. He knew exactly where to hit: my insecurity about my career, my fear that I had wasted my potential supporting his. He thought he was looking at a woman walking away with a pity check and a used SUV. I didn't answer. I didn't blink. I just stared at him, letting the silence stretch out between us. In my mind, I wasn't in this courtroom. I was back in my home office at 2 a.m., staring at a spreadsheet on a laptop Grayson thought I only used for Pinterest. I was thinking about the email I had printed out and placed in Bennett's leather briefcase. A single sheet of paper that carried more weight than the entire stack Grayson had just signed. It was my updated financial disclosure. Grayson thought I was destitute. He thought I was the little wife who needed an allowance to buy groceries. He had absolutely no idea that while he was busy playing CEO and chasing his 20-something assistant, I had been building an empire right under his nose. He didn't know about Crestview Holdings. He didn't know about the 27 rental properties. He didn't know that the net worth of the woman sitting opposite him rivaled his own. I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile, not really, just a muscle spasm of anticipation. Grayson mistook it for submission. He sat back, buttoning his jacket, ready to leave. He checked his watch, a $30,000 Rolex I had bought him for his 35th birthday, with money he thought I'd saved by clipping coupons. "Your Honor," Bennett said. The sound of his voice stopped the proceedings just as the judge was reaching for her gavel. Judge Ellis, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie humanity had to offer, paused. "Yes, Mr. Cole, is there an issue with the signature?" she asked, peering over her reading glasses. "No issue with the signature, Your Honor," Bennett said, standing slowly. He moved with the deliberate slowness of a predator that knows its prey has nowhere to run. "However, before we conclude the division of assets, there is a procedural matter we must address. My client has an obligation to the court to be fully transparent regarding her financial status. As of this morning, there has been a significant update to Ms. Mitchell's asset portfolio that was not reflected in the initial filing. We would be remiss if we allowed the court to finalize this divorce based on outdated information. Spencer, Grayson's lawyer, frowned. He looked confused. Why would the wife's lawyer be delaying a settlement that was clearly in the husband's favor? Usually, it was the wealthy spouse trying to hide money, not the dependent spouse trying to reveal it. "We have a flight to catch, Your Honor," Spencer said dismissively. Unless Ms. Mitchell has suddenly found a $10 bill on the sidewalk outside the courthouse, I fail to see how a minor update warrants a delay. Grayson chuckled, a dry, arrogant sound. Bennett ignored him. He reached into his briefcase. The leather catch snapping open sounded incredibly loud in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. "I am requesting permission to file an amended financial disclosure on behalf of Ms. Mitchell," Bennett said. He walked toward the bench, placed the document before the judge, then walked to the plaintiff's table and dropped a copy in front of Grayson. It landed with a heavy thud. Grayson didn't even look at it at first. He was still staring at me, that smirk plastered on his face. He thought it was a joke, a desperate plea for alimony. In his mind, I was Taylor the homemaker, Taylor the failure, Taylor who had nothing but what he gave her. He reached out a manicured, steady hand and flipped open the cover page. I watched his eyes. I watched the exact moment they hit the summary line. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the cold table, the ice in my chest spreading out to cool my blood. I watched as he read the first page. I saw his brow furrow slightly. He blinked as if trying to clear a smudge from his contact lenses. He turned the page, then another. His smile didn't disappear instantly. It froze, became rigid, a mask that no longer fit. The corners of his mouth were still turned up, but the life had drained from his face. He looked at the number, then the name of the LLC at the top, then the valuation. He was still smiling, but it was the terrifying, vacant smile of a man whose brain had just encountered information it could not process. He was looking at a ghost. He was looking at a monster. He was looking at me. And I just sat there, the invisible wife, waiting for the scream. To understand the ghost I became in that courtroom, you have to meet the woman I was 10 years ago. I was 23 years old when I met Grayson. I wasn't a homemaker then. I wasn't a dependent. I was a data analyst for a mid-sized logistics firm in Austin, a job that required me to find patterns in chaos and turn numbers into narratives. I was good at it. I was sharp. I was ambitious in a quiet, steady way that didn't require a megaphone. Grayson was 27. A brilliant but chaotic engineer with a laptop full of code and a head full of dreams that had no grounding in reality. He had the engine of a Ferrari, but no steering wheel. That was where I came in. He didn't look at me like a piece of furniture. He looked at me like I was oxygen. We spent our first year in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Portland that smelled perpetually of stale coffee and takeout Thai. Ridgeview Systems wasn't a company then. It was just a folder on his desktop and a frantic energy that kept him awake for 3 days straight. But code alone doesn't build a business. Grayson could build the most sophisticated algorithm in the world, but he had no idea how to sell it to a human being. I remember one night specifically, 3 a.m., sitting on the cheap laminate floor of our living room, surrounded by whiteboards I had dragged home from an office supply store. Grayson was spiraling, convinced the product was too complex, that nobody would pay the license fee he wanted. I took the marker from his hand. Stop trying to sell them the software, Grayson, I said, my voice raspy from exhaustion. Sell them the safety. Don't charge a lump sum. They'll balk at the price tag. Make it a subscription, a utility bill they pay every month because they can't imagine operating without it. I drew the diagram on the board, mapped the customer life cycle, sketched the freemium model where users could demo the core features for free, getting hooked before the paywall came down. I wrote the copy for the pitch deck, translating his technical jargon into the language of profit and efficiency investors wanted to hear. Grayson stared at the board, then at me, eyes wide with that manic, brilliant intensity I fell in love with. "You're a genius, Tay," he said, pulling me into a hug that knocked the wind out of me. "You're my second brain. I swear I'd be coding in a cave without you. You're the only one who gets it." He called me his co-founder in private, his secret weapon. But secrets, by definition, are things you hide. The shift happened so slowly, I didn't notice the eraser until half of me was already gone. It started with the first angel investor meeting, the one that would decide whether Ridgeview lived or died. I had prepped Grayson for weeks, written the script, anticipated every question about churn rates and acquisition costs. I wanted to be at the table. I expected to be. But the morning of the meeting, Grayson was jittery, fixing his tie in the mirror. "Tay, maybe it's better if you sit in the back today. Take notes. You know how these old-school money guys are. If they see a girlfriend involved, they'll think it's a mom-and-pop shop. We need to look corporate, singular." I felt a sting, sharp and cold, but I swallowed it. I told myself he was right. Strategy, not exclusion. So I sat in the back row of the conference room, invisible against the beige wall, notebook in my lap. I watched Grayson deliver my presentation, point to the subscription model I had drawn on our living room floor, explain the customer psychology I had taught him over lukewarm pizza. When the lead investor asked how he came up with such a sustainable revenue model, Grayson didn't look at me. He smiled that charming, confident smile and tapped his temple. Just innate business intuition. I realized the market was shifting and knew I had to pivot. It just came to me. I sat there, pen hovering over paper, heart hammering against my ribs. He had stolen my words, claimed my mind as his own instinct. But when the investors signed the check for $200,000, I forced myself to exhale. It's for us. It doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as the company survives. We're a team. His win is my win. That was the first lie I told myself, the foundation on which he built his empire and the hole in which I buried my career. As Ridgeview Systems grew, the walls around me grew taller. We moved from the apartment to a condo, then to a sprawling glass and steel house in the Denver foothills. The money poured in, but with every deposit, my role shrank. I went from second brain to support system, then simply the wife. Grayson hired a VP of sales, a chief marketing officer, people to do the jobs I had been doing for free in our pajamas. When I asked to be officially brought on payroll with a title, he laughed, gentle but dismissive. "Babe, why would you want the stress? You've done the hard part. Now enjoy life. Plan the parties, handle the contractors for the remodel. You're the face of the family. That's a full-time job." So I became the face. I organized launch parties where he was the star. I managed PR to make him look like a benevolent tech visionary. I remembered the birthdays of board members' wives. I booked flights. I managed household staff. I made sure his life was a frictionless surface he could glide across without stumbling. On paper, Ridgeview Systems had one founder. On tax returns, I was listed as spouse. The humiliation became a public spectator sport. I remember a dinner party about 3 years ago at a steakhouse in Dallas, with potential partners from a rival firm. The conversation turned to a merger and valuation caps. I leaned forward, swirling my wine. "Actually," I said, voice clear, "if you structure the equity split based on last quarter's EBITDA, you might avoid the tax liability on the—" Grayson cut me off. He didn't shout. He just chuckled and placed his hand over mine, patting it like one pats a confused child. "Taylor's our resident expert on finding a bargain," he said to the table, flashing a conspiratorial grin at the other men. "If you need a coupon for detergent or want to know which grocery store has the best deal on organic kale, she's your girl. But let's leave the boring business stuff to the guys, right, honey?" The table erupted in deep baritone laughter. I froze, mouth still half open. I looked at the men laughing, then at Grayson. He wasn't looking at me with malice. He was looking with total indifference. He had reduced my intellect, the mind that had saved his company in its infancy, to a joke about grocery coupons. I closed my mouth. I forced the corners of my lips up. I laughed, a hollow, brittle sound that felt like swallowing glass. "Just looking out for the budget," I said, playing the role he had written for me. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I was vanishing. The Taylor who analyzed data, who built strategies, she was fading, replaced by a hollow shell of a socialite wife. I was an accessory, the hood ornament on the car he was driving. But the final nail came 6 months later. I was in the kitchen drinking tea, unable to sleep. Grayson was at the island eating leftovers, staring at his iPad, stressed about a new product line, failing to gain traction. I had spent the day looking at user data I could still access because he never changed his passwords, assuming I wouldn't understand it anyway. I saw the problem clearly. The interface was too clunky for the mobile demographic. "Grayson," I said softly, "I was looking at the beta numbers today." He didn't look up. "Yes, the drop-off rate is happening at the login screen. Too many steps. Switch to biometric login and remove two-factor for the trial version. You could increase retention by 20%. I waited for him to say, "You're right." I waited for, "My second brain is back." Grayson put down his fork, turned on the stool, and looked at me. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth they held when we were 23. There was no partnership in his gaze, only annoyance. "Taylor," he said, voice flat and hard. "Stop." I blinked. "Stop what?" "Stop trying to play executive. You haven't been in the loop for 5 years. You don't know the compliance issues. You don't know the code base. You're focusing on things you don't understand." "I understand data, Grayson. I built the model this company runs on." "You built a spreadsheet 10 years ago," he snapped. "That doesn't make you a C-suite executive. Look, I work 18-hour days. I carry 300 employees on my back. When I come home, I don't want to debate strategy with my wife." He stood, taking his plate to the sink. "You're great at the house stuff, Tay. The garden looks amazing. The gala last week was beautiful. Stick to that. Let me handle the heavy lifting. Don't pretend you understand business just because you slept with the CEO." He walked out. I stood gripping the marble counter until my knuckles turned white. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Just because you slept with the CEO. He had rewritten history completely. In his mind, I had never been an architect. I had just been the girl in the room. He hadn't just stolen my credit, he had stolen my reality. That was the night the sadness died. Sadness requires hope. But that night, I realized there was no going back. He thought he had put me in my place. He was wrong. He had just given me the motivation to stop building his empire and start building my own. If he wanted me to handle the house, fine. I would handle every house I could get my hands on until I owned a portfolio that made his stock options look like pocket change. I finished my tea, washed the mug, walked into his home office, sat down at his computer, and opened a new browser window. I typed 2 words, foreclosure auctions. The ghost was done haunting the halls. It was time for the ghost to go to work. The hallway leading to Grayson's home office was lined with plush runner rugs that dampened my footsteps. It was a Tuesday evening around 9:00. I was carrying a tray with a fresh pot of herbal tea and a ceramic cup, the beautiful wife playing her role to perfection. The house was silent except for the low hum of the expensive HVAC and the murmur of Grayson's voice drifting through the cracked door. I knew he was on a call with Harlan Pierce, kingmaker in the tech world. If Harlan backed your Series C, you didn't just get money, you got a coronation. I stopped outside the door, balancing, the tray on my hip, waiting for a pause so I could slip in, deposit the tea, and vanish like a good ghost. Speakerphone was on. I could hear Harlan's gravelly voice. Numbers look solid, Grayson. User acquisition costs are down, retention sticky. You run a tight ship. Thank you, Harlan, Grayson replied, voice coated in that specific blend of humility and arrogance he reserved for men richer than him. I've always believed if you don't control the micro, you can't master the macro. Pause. Then Harlan asked the question that made my breath hitch. What about the personal side? I do my due diligence. You're married. Does the wife have a hand in the pot? On the board? Voting shares? I need to know if I'm getting into bed with a husband and wife team. I don't like family drama messing up my cap table. I stood frozen, heart hammering. This was the moment he could acknowledge me. He didn't have to call me a genius, just a nod to the truth. Grayson laughed, dismissive, airy, like brushing lint off his jacket. Oh, Taylor, he said, tone light and amused. No, Harlan, you don't have to worry about that. Taylor's sweet, keeps the house beautiful, makes sure my shirts are pressed, that sort of thing. Cold spread through my chest. She doesn't understand business, he continued, gaining confidence. Honestly, half the time, she doesn't even know what the software does. She's just there. The words hung like toxic smoke, not violent. He hadn't called me stupid. He had done something worse. He had reduced my entire existence to that of a lamp. Static background noise. Good, Harlan grunted. Keep it that way. I invest in CEOs, not marriages. I didn't go in. I turned mechanically, carried the tray back to the kitchen, poured the tea down the sink, and watched the last 10 years of my life swirl away with it. That night, I didn't cry. I entered a state of cold, clinical clarity. When Grayson came to bed hours later, smelling of triumph and scotch, I pretended to be asleep. When his breathing deepened, I slipped out, took my laptop, and went to the guest room. I needed proof, not for court yet, but for myself. I dug into our shared cloud storage, scrolled back to the folder labeled Project Genesis, opened Draft Grayson Final V3, dated 7 years ago. Metadata, author Taylor Mitchell. Editing time 42 hours. I read my own words. The market doesn't need another tool. It needs a habitat. My line, written while eating cold noodles as Grayson panicked, we would never make it. Another file, pricing model. Author, Taylor Mitchell. Investor pitch deck. Author, Taylor Mitchell. I wasn't just there. I was the foundation. He was living in a skyscraper I designed and had convinced himself he laid every brick. A few weeks later, the insult compounded. Syncing our family calendar, a notification popped up from a secure messaging app Grayson thought he had hidden. Lena, the presentation went great. You were amazing up there. Also left my earring in your car. Oops. Ixkik. I knew who she was. 23, polished, aggressive, his executive assistant. The younger, shinier version of what he thought he deserved. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt rage. Not about the sex, but that he was sharing his work with her, letting her into the boardroom, respecting her opinion, looking at her with the shine he once saved for me. He was cheating on me intellectually for years, while leaving me domestic scraps. I confronted him 3 days later, Saturday morning in the kitchen. I'm not booking the tickets for the Aspen retreat, I said calmly, buttering toast. Grayson stopped, keys jingling. What? Why? That's your job, Tay. It's not my job, Grayson. I'm not your secretary. Ask Lena. She seems to be handling a lot of your personal affairs lately. Silence. His face cycled shock, guilt, defensive anger. You went through my phone, he accused. I ignored it. I'm tired, Grayson. Tired of being treated like an employee you don't have to pay. I built the strategy for the alpha launch. I designed the subscription tier that got you Series B. And yet to you, I'm just the woman who picks up dry cleaning. He groaned, running a hand down his face. Oh my God, Taylor, are we doing this again? You're rewriting history. I stood, chair scraping loudly. Am I? The metadata is on the files. My name is on the original docs. He laughed, cruel, pitying. Babe, you helped with some typos, brainstormed a little. That's what supportive partners do. Don't pretend you were running the company. You're exaggerating your role to feel better. You're not a businessman, Taylor. You're a nurturer. That's your strength. He tried to put hands on my shoulders. I stepped back. I'm sorry if you feel unappreciated, he said, tone dripping false sincerity. I'll buy you that bracelet you were looking at, the Cartier one. I know I've been busy, but don't invent a reality where you're Steve Jobs. It's not healthy. He checked his watch. I have to go. Have Lena book the tickets. She's paid to do it. You're my wife. Just relax. He kissed my cheek, dry, meaningless, and left. He believed his own lie. That was the most terrifying part. Even his apology was manipulation, a pat on the head. I walked to the master bathroom, stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman reflected, looked tired, small, exactly what Grayson said she was. But behind the eyes, something was shifting. The same part of my brain that saw patterns 10 years ago was waking up. I leaned forward, hands on cold marble, stared into my own pupils. If to you I'm just furniture, I whispered, voice steadying into steel, then I'll become the person who owns the bar, house. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would take the one thing he actually respected, money. I opened a new browser tab, how to form an LLC without a spouse's signature. The ghost was done haunting. It was time to start hunting. Most people think real estate empires are built in boardrooms with handshakes and scotch. Mine was built on the smell of bleach, cheap coffee, and the terrifying realization I had no idea what I was doing. It started with a childhood memory, my mother a small-time agent, selling sad little boxes in the valley outside Nashville. I learned to spot water damage before long division. New fresh paint usually hid black mold. That knowledge lay dormant under layers of being Mrs. Grayson Harper. But after She's Just There, dormancy ended. While Grayson watched the market close on CNBC, I was upstairs scouring county tax sale sites. It became my obsession, a logic puzzle, an escape. I couldn't buy under my own name. Grayson's lawyers would sniff it out. So I formed Crestview Holdings, LLC. Crestview was my mother's maiden name. View, the only part of Ridgeview I felt I could take. I rented a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over. Opened a business checking account with modest pre-marriage savings Grayson called cute. Then I found it. A duplex in an industrial district 40 minutes from our gated community. Foreclosure, bank-owned, siding peeling, porch sagging, lawn mostly dead weeds and broken glass. Asking price $42,000. To Grayson, that was a rounding error. To me, it was everything. I went to a credit union where nobody knew me, used my pristine personal credit, put down a massive chunk of savings, took a predatory 12% personal loan for the rest. When the bank's lawyer handed me the keys, he smirked. "Good luck with that one, lady. Hope you know how to handle squatters." I didn't, but I took the keys and drove my luxury SUV to a neighborhood where I immediately locked the doors. The first month was a masterclass in humility. Monday, Friday, I was the perfect wife, arranged flowers, hosted dinners, nodded when Grayson talked genius. Weekends, I told him I was taking pottery or yoga retreats. Instead, I parked around the corner, changed into overalls and a bandana, and scrubbed until my hands were raw. I learned trisodium phosphate cleans nicotine better than anything. That agreeable gray paint instantly adds $200 a month in perceived value. I hired handymen for cash, got cocky, hired a cheap bathroom guy, who vanished after laying crooked tile and leaving a loose valve. 2 days later, water poured through the ceiling. I sat in the wet living room and ugly cried, nearly ready to surrender the property. Instead, I called Jade, my best friend, forensic accountant, the only person who knew about Crestview. Sobbing, I told her I'd ruined everything. "How much damage?" she asked calmly. 5, maybe 6,000. Projected rent both units? 1,200 top, 900 bottom once fixed. Okay, gross $2,100 month. Mortgage on that terrible loan, $600, taxes, insurance, $300. You break even month 7, cash positive year 2. You paid the stupid tax. Everyone does on their first deal. Dry your eyes, hire a real plumber, fix the floor. Profit is in year 5. Don't look at the water, look at the spreadsheet. I did. 6 weeks later, I had tenants, a single mom named Carla downstairs, a young mechanic named Dave upstairs. When Carla handed me the first cash envelope, $900 in 20s and 10s, my hands shook. It wasn't much compared to Grayson's client dinners, but I held it like gold. Driving home to our $10 million mansion, I pulled the deed from the glove box. Owner, Crestview Holdings, LLC. Authorized signatory, Taylor Mitchell. No Mrs. Grayson Harper, just me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. Grant used money to control people. This money was freedom. I looked at the mansion and whispered, "If you don't want to write my name on anything we build, that's fine. I'll just write it myself." The next 6 years were a masterclass in deception, played between a lie and a closing statement. If you asked Grayson, he'd say with a patronizing smile, I had finally found my center: hot yoga Tuesdays, pottery Saturdays. In reality, the yoga mat was rolled blueprints for a triplex in the warehouse district. Pottery class was a standing appointment with my contractor Miller, who taught me to spot load-bearing walls from 20 feet. I was doing buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. It became a heartbeat louder than my marriage. Grant was oblivious, too busy chasing IPO to notice his wife's odometer racking up miles that didn't match yoga studio distance. At a cocktail party 3 years in, Grayson held court with junior partners, while I stood beside him in a dress worth more than my first duplex rent. "You have to find balance," he said, gesturing with his glass. "Take Taylor. She used to stress about everything. Now she's practically a yogi every Tuesday. Religiously. Keeps her grounded. Right, babe?" He squeezed my shoulder, possessive like a child with a toy. "Absolutely," I said with my practiced vapid smile. Amazing what deep breathing does for perspective. My phone buzzed. Rent received. Unit 4B $1,200. Then duplex on Elm $1,800. Then bungalow on 5th $1,500. While he bragged about managing my time, I silently collected $4,500 gross in under 2 minutes. But there were near collapses. Year 4, the local economy tanked. A factory closure, 2 towns over emptied working-class rentals. I had just closed on my biggest risk, an 8-unit I called the Citadel, leveraged to the hilt. 5 units vacant in 2 months. Mortgage still wanted $4,000 month. I dipped into secret credit cards, terrified a missed payment would alert Grayson. Jade found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by red numbers. "You're panicking," she said. "I'm going to lose the Citadel, then the cross-collateralized loans domino. Grant will find out and smirk, 'I told you so.'" "He won't," she said, "because you're not going to lose it. You're charging market rate in a crash. Drop to $900, offer free Wi-Fi, fix faucet same day. Become the best landlord in the county. Survive the winter, own the spring." I swallowed pride, lowered rents, offered a free month for 12-month leases, painted hallways cheerful yellow. It worked, units filled, I survived. When the economy turned 2 years later, I had a waiting list. By year 6, the hobby was a monster. 27 units, 6,000 month pure profit from the Citadel alone. I had a property manager, Saul, for clogged toilets, a tax strategist, Helen, to keep taxable income modest while equity soared. One night, I looked at the consolidated balance sheet. Estimated market value, $27.8 million. I Googled. Ridgeview Systems. Grayson's dividend that year was substantial, but after his spending, his liquid net worth was actually lower than mine. He never noticed I barely touched the joint account. I was subsidizing his lifestyle with my own dividends, and he thought he was supporting me. 3 years before the divorce, I walked into Bennett Cole's office in a wig and sunglasses, placed deeds on his desk. "If we divorce, can he touch these? All purchased through the LLC with premarital savings and separate credit." Bennett cleaned his glasses slowly. "In Colorado, income from separate property remains separate if never commingled. Did you ever deposit rent into a joint account? Never. Did he ever pay for a repair? No. Did he ever sign a document? He doesn't know they exist." Bennett smiled, a shark on my side. "Then you've built a fortress, Ms. Mitchell. If he tries to storm it, we bury him in the moat." When Grayson joked about my pottery class at parties, I stopped feeling angry. I felt dark, warm satisfaction. Let him think I was shaping clay. I was shaping a future where I never needed his permission again. It wasn't a lipstick stain or Lena's text that ended my marriage. It was a PDF sent at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in Grayson's office looking for a charger. His iPad glowed with a notification. Email from Spencer. Asset protection, IPO strategy, Mitchell settlement. Passcode still his birthday. I opened it. Grayson, we need to move fast. S1 filing public in 4 months. Can't have messy divorce dragging share price. Need her out before roadshow. Exposure? Does she have assets, business interests? 0. Few thousand in savings. I give her allowance. Dabbles in hobbies, pottery, yoga, no income, no equity, risk-free. Settle lump sum, condo plus, used car, money. She's used to living simply. Structure separation to fully shield future Northline equity. Minimize payout to absolute floor. She's a liability I need to shed. She's a liability. She has nothing. I forwarded the chain to my encrypted email, deleted the sent copy, wiped fingerprints, and walked to my laptop. Subject line to Bennett. It is time. 2 hours later, I sat in Bennett's office, handing over 3 binders, formation docs, deeds to 27 properties, tax returns, P&L, debt schedules. Bennett stopped at the Citadel cash flow page, looked over his glasses. You did this alone? I nodded. Separate address, separate accounts, never used a joint card for a single nail. He leaned back, slow smile spreading. This is a fortress. Separate property is separate. He can't touch it. But when we reveal you're a successful investor, it destroys his credibility, proves he doesn't know his own wife. We wait, Bennett said. Let him file. Let him lie under oath. Let him offer the insulting settlement. Then, at the final disclosure phase, we drop the hammer. 3 days later, Grayson sat me down with wine, looking mournful. Taylor, we've grown apart. My work consumes me. It's not fair to you. You deserve someone present. Best we separate. He didn't mention the IPO, framed it as mercy. His relief was palpable when I agreed quietly. He pushed the folder. Very generous. Keep the SUV, $50,000 lump sum, 6 months health insurance. $50,000 for 10 years for the business plan that launched his career. I nearly laughed. I'll have a lawyer review, I said. Of course, but tell them to be realistic. The company is all stock. I'm cash poor right now. He was lying. I knew about the offshore accounts. Over the next weeks, I played defeated wife perfectly. Bennett sent emails asking for minor concessions, guest room furniture, extra $5,000 moving expenses. Grayson agreed magnanimously, told friends, poor Taylor's struggling, but I'm making it easy. He had no idea I was in a conference room with a forensic accountant finalizing the Crestview valuation. The night before the hearing, Grayson came home late. I was packing boxes, props. Tomorrow's the big day, he said, almost triumphant. You'll be free, Taylor. You can finally pursue whatever it is you do. I taped the box shut, loud, harsh. Yes, Grayson, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. I think you're going to be surprised by how much I've grown. He laughed. You're cute, Tay. Get some sleep. He thought he was walking toward victory. He was walking off a cliff. In legal warfare, silence is strategy. I submitted a preliminary disclosure listing only my personal checking, $4,300, jewelry, SUV, low credit card debt, the portrait of a dependent housewife. Bait. Bennett. If he thinks you're coming after his company, he'll circle wagons. If he sees a woman barely scraping by, he'll get sloppy, greedy. He did. Assumed I was financially illiterate, wouldn't hire a forensic accountant. He transferred stock options to his sister's trust, opened an undisclosed Nevada account, actively hiding assets. We watched him dig his grave, waited until his final disclosure was locked under oath. Then it was my turn. For 2 weeks, my dining room became a war room. Jade, junior associates, appraisers, auditors. We valued everything, traced every dollar, created flow charts, blue for Crestview, red for marital estate, never crossed. In the chaos, we found the knife. Jade cross-referencing vendors. Ridgeview rents their secondary server facility from Apex Commercial Group, $12,500 a month. I owned 40% of Apex through Crestview. For 3 years, Grayson had been paying rent that partially went into my pocket. We listed it plainly: passive income, commercial lease, Ridgeview Systems. Let him do the math. The day before the hearing, the amended disclosure was a 3-inch thick white binder, heavy as gold. I signed Taylor Mitchell, sole member, Crestview Holdings LLC. That night, I wandered the house one last time, lay in the guest room, and, for the first time in 10 years, slept peacefully. Morning came, cold, clear, a good day for a revolution. Back in the courtroom, Spencer outlined the $50,000 plies $2,000 locked-up shares settlement with flourish. Grayson signed with a grin, leaned over. "You'll be fine, Taylor. You've always been good at scraping by. Builds character." Judge Ellis. "Miss Mitchell, do you agree to the terms?" "Your Honor," I said calmly, "I cannot agree, not because of the amount, but because the premise is factually incorrect." Grayson sighed theatrically. Bennett. "We filed an amended disclosure this morning. It would be fair for the court and Mr. Harper to review before signatures." The clerk carried in the thick white binder. Thud. Spencer opened it, back stiffened, face paled. Grayson snatched it. "What is she claiming? Credit card debt?" He landed on the summary page. Crestview Holdings LLC, 27 properties, estimated net equity $27,140,000. Time warped. The grin cracked, froze, then shattered. Life drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost, and realized the ghost was worth more than he was. He looked at me, mouth open, no sound. Then back at the binder, the Chicago private equity buyout offer attached. Judge Ellis. "Mr. Sterling, does your client wish to proceed, or does this change the landscape?" Grayson made a strangled, choking sound. Spencer stammered for recess. Grayson whispered, "$27 million. Not to the court, but to the universe." I leaned to the mic. "I'm happy to wait, Your Honor. I know math can be complicated for some people." He flinched as if slapped. "Order. Gavel." Bennett explained Crestview. Formed, managed, solely owned by me for 6 years. Late filing deliberate, to let Grayson complete his sworn disclosures first. Grayson shot up. "This is ridiculous. She's a housewife, pottery classes. This is fraud. She took my money." "Sit down, Mr. Harper," Judge Ellis barked. I took the stand, explained calmly. Started with premarital savings, bought distressed duplex, renovated myself, brrr method repeated. Built brick by brick while he thought I was at yoga. Spencer cross-examined desperately. "You expect us to believe you built $28 million without 1 cent of marital funds?" "Every dollar traced, never commingled. In fact, Ridgeview Systems has been my commercial tenant for 3 years, paying rent to a syndicate I partially own." Gasps. Grayson looked physically ill, realizing the landlord he complained about raising rent was his wife. Arthur displayed flowcharts, clean separation. Then the intercepted emails, Grayson calling me just there, a liability with nothing. Judge Ellis, voice soft but lethal. "It appears, Mr. Harper, your assessment of your wife's capabilities was significantly flawed. Miss Mitchell was not just there. She was building a portfolio that rivals your own liquid net worth, while you dismissed her existence. Gavel. Settlement rejected. Recess. In the marble corridor, Grayson grabbed my arm, spun me. How long have you been hiding 27 million $? I didn't hide it, Grayson. I operated under my own name. You just never looked down long enough to see. He paced, then switched to dealmaker charm. We're looking at this wrong. Merge Crestview with Ridgeview's facilities division. We'd be unstoppable. A power couple. Withdraw the divorce. Things will be different. I'll respect you, real partners. I laughed, dry, hollow. Partners? How would you introduce me, Grayson? Co-CEO or, oh, she's just there signing meaningless papers? That was just talk. I was stressed. You don't love me. You love the reflection of yourself in my eyes. And now the reflection holds a bigger balance sheet. You don't know how to handle it. I walked away. Back in court, Judge Ellis ruled, Grayson's disclosure, negligent toy, bad faith, hidden assets. Crestview proven separate property, untouchable. Unequal division, I receive 60% liquid marital assets. For early contribution to Ridgeview, despite Grayson erasing it, 15% of his personal stock, no lockup. Grayson choked. 15%? That's a voting block that stalls the IPO. Then perhaps, Mr. Harper, you should have thought of that before telling the court your wife was worth nothing. Gavel. Case closed. Grayson sat frozen, staring at the ruin of his victory. I walked out, heels clicking like a clock running out, past Grayson, without a word into blinding late afternoon Denver sun. I had 27 buildings, 28 million and my name back. Across the street, a beautiful dilapidated brick textile factory, windows shattered, graffiti vivid, brand new sign glinting, for sale. I smiled, the hungry smile of a builder. I dialed Jade. It's over, we won, and get the checkbook ready. I think I just found our headquarters. If one day the person who treated you like you were invisible had to face your true value in front of the whole world, would you show them the faded copy they expected? Or the masterpiece they never believed was real? That's where my story ends. But for Taylor Mitchell, the empire is just beginning. Thank you for listening. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and your thoughts on Grayson's downfall. Let's chat. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Violet Revenge Stories, like, and hit that bell so more people hear it.